Ah yes, another FMV game. They're a guilty pleasure of mine, as some of you might know. It's one of those cases where you almost know for sure the game will be bad, but there is a sense of morbid curiosity forcing you to play it anyway. This game's full name is Made Interactive Movie 1 Runaway, but I will simply be referring to it as Made, in the interest of simplicity. If you've watched my videos, you will have noticed how these kinds of games seem to attract me for some strange reason. At best they're okay, at worst they are, well, this. But let's take it one step at a time. First of all, you can see that this video is in 21:9. While the game is supposed to be at 1080p, it seems to be capable of stretching and adapting to this ultra-wide aspect. I did not expect that, and it's certainly the first time I've seen this happen, but it left a positive impression on me. I know what you must be thinking. You are looking at the footage and noticing that there are black bars on pretty much all sides. Yes, it's not perfect, but I still prefer it 100 times over having to play it at normal aspect. Another thing you may have noticed is the fact that the video quality is not the best. This may be affected a bit by the stretching, but I did switch back to the normal 1080p and the picture is almost identical. So in other words, this game's footage just generally does not look very good. The gameplay is quite mundane at the start of the game. You watch a movie play out, you get to make a boring choice, which then will have next to no effect on the story. Where things get interesting, however, is when the game's second act begins. Our protagonist is this Korean girl who's supposedly really popular on social media. Other girls recognize her on the street and ask to take their pictures with her. She's a real celebrity apparently. At some point, she gets abducted and locked up in an abandoned building. This is where the gameplay becomes more interesting. You get to actually solve puzzles in order to progress. It's supposed to be a bit like an escape room game. I can't help but be reminded of the Zero Escape series. The problem with Made is that the puzzles are so oversimplified and boring that you might as well fall asleep while doing them. They are an afterthought, which is really sad because the idea definitely has potential. So now that we know that the gameplay is a disappointment, all that is left for us to do is to try and enjoy the Korean movie. But unfortunately, this is where things get so much worse. I haven't watched any Korean movies, but this one fails in every conceivable way. First and foremost, the actors. You don't get many of them since this is obviously a low budget title. But what this game lacks in quantity, it more than makes up in terms of lack of quality. Oh yeah, you heard that right. The acting is awful. The problem is that it's so bad, but simultaneously not bad enough to be genuinely funny. You might have heard of a movie called The Room. Its protagonist is a man known as Tommy Wiseau, a man whose acting is so bad that the movie actually becomes hilarious and then turns into a meme. People organize groups and watch this to this day and have fun watching it because of how bad it is. Well, Made has reached the sweet spot of acting that's terrible but not terrible enough to be funny. So you are only left with either a bland and emotionless performance or the exact opposite, where strong emotions are conveyed so poorly that you can't but shake your head. And our protagonist is the worst of them by far. It doesn't help that the characters are given idiotic dialogue and behavior. We also feature lots of what I can only describe as exaggerated social interactions which seem copied from some really bad slice of life anime. The game is in Korean and it even started with the Korean language set as the default one. Luckily the menu only has a few things you can click, so after about 30 seconds of trial and error, I had switched the written language back to English, which it should have been from the start for me. Unfortunately, the translation is not perfect. A few small segments were simply left without subtitles for some reason, and on other occasions, I had the feeling that the translation did not really convey what was actually being said. But since I don't speak Korean, it's just an assumption on my end. I can't actually prove this. The game's plot is equally stupid. There are many times when the characters act inadequately. People are tied up and can't move, only to get up and free themselves within a second without any explanation as to how this is suddenly possible, simply because now the plot does not require them to any longer stay tied up. In one scene, one of the characters is in pain from a noise coming from speakers, while the other one next to her doesn't seem to mind it at all. In a third scene, the characters are being lowered into barrels with what appears to be acid. They scream and wait to be dipped into it, although their legs are untied and they could thus easily spread them and simply stand on the edges of the barrels, but they don't do that. They just wiggle around and scream. The movie also features lots of weird scenes which create the appearance as though they would lead up to something, but then nothing happens and all is just forgotten as if they never happened. It would appear that literally everything seems to have been put together without any thought going into the actual scenes. You can see a ton of amateur short films on YouTube which are better designed and absolutely free. I'm usually very lenient with FMV games since I enjoy them for some strange reason, but this one deserves no mercy at all. It has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. The worst part of it is that they charge you €12 on Steam for it. A quarter of that price would have been more appropriate. That way you can give it to one of your friends and then pressure them into playing it while you watch. At least that would be funny. For you, of course, not for the friend. And yeah, there are multiple endings here and they all suck. It actually feels like the game is trying to be educational to some extent. It's as though it's trying to warn teenagers of the dangers of using too much social media and sharing private information. I don't know, and at this point, I'm pretty much grasping at straws here. In any case, this has to have been the worst FMV title I have had the displeasure of playing yet. It is absolutely terrible in every possible way. Don't waste your money on it, and don't waste your time on it either. So have I learned from my mistakes? Will I stop playing FMV games in the future? No, I have not. Call it nostalgia, call it stupidity, these games are almost always really bad, yet I still want to try them out. I'm beyond saving at this point. But if there happen to be some other people out there who are interested in these types of games, know that I have taken one for the team and skipped this particular one. As always, thank you for watching my videos and have a great day.